Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Saturday Morning D&D Show. My name is Jordan, with a silent PH in the middle, and I am joined always by my wonderful co-host, Sir Lucian, over at Sir Lucian Gaming. Say hello, sir.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another wonderful Saturday morning. I hope your sun is shining as bright as mine is. It's going to be a nice, warm summer day, so I'm loving it.
Yeah, it is rainy and dreary, and I have to mow my
Oh,
lawn, and I can't do that, but when it's all rainy like this. But yeah, summer is here, which means lots of cool stuff is happening. Last week we had all the announcements of the descent. And
mhm.
also on Tuesday, Ghosts of Saltmarsh came out, so we have this wonderful book that I have been reading. I'm like not very far into it because every time I sit down to read it, I get distracted by doing some other stuff. But I'm liking what I've read so far, and I haven't skimmed the ship stuff yet. Have you done the ship, like? Because I know there's a whole section on like manning and crewing a boat and things like that. Have you read that yet, Lucian?
Just a little bit. I haven't dove into the rules enough that I could run them, but definitely I looked around at how they made some of the rules, some of the ship naming tables,
Mm-hmm.
some of the encounter tables that they added. And I know they resemble the rules we looked at in the Unearthed Arcana article, but they are slightly different.
Mm-hmm.
So just, I think, skimmed over probably pretty much as like you did at this point, waiting for my group to have a ship that where they'll need these rules where you
Yeah.
do ship combat, or how do you fight underwater, what are the things you have to deal with, those kinds of things, which could happen pretty soon. You never know in a campaign.
No, and reading through this campaign, so I'm running this for next Wednesday. We're going to start running this, and players are making brand new characters, and they're all level 1 and stuff. And they were talking like a month ago in our group chat. They were like, well, what are we going to name our boat? And I was like, whoa, guys. Like, I don't even know if you get a boat. Like, you shouldn't go around being like, we're going to name our boat and we're going to do this. And I was trying to I didn't want them to get so excited about something that might not happen in the adventure. And then sure enough, I was reading the adventure, and it's within the first like 3 or 4 levels that there's a potential to get access to a boat pretty early on that they can then go and like use as transportation around and stuff. And I was like, oh, okay, so they're going to be excited. Basically, they're going to be really enjoy. It should be
That's
a lot
good.
of fun. It does feel like a classic adventure. I've only read the first 2 so far, but they are very
Mm-hmm.
much like the king wants you to do this, and so you are adventurers that are hired to go out and do this, and it's to explore this, and there's a secret to it, but at the same time it is kind of this like dungeon crawl through houses and through the areas and things like that. But so far I'm really enjoying it. I think it's going to be a lot of fun, and I like how they tie it in with or I like that it is part of Greyhawk, but you can also tie
Mm-hmm.
it into the other campaign settings if you are interested. There's an Eberron, a Forgotten Realms, and the other one starts with an M that I can't remember. Mystara?
Yeah, I saw that one listed. Yeah, one I had not played in. Yeah.
Yeah, I have not played that one, nor do I know much about it. But it's gonna be anyway. It's like super fun, and I'm realizing my players are in the chat now, and they're just like, "Whoa, spoilers!" I'm like, "Okay, well, don't tune into the Saturday Morning D&D show when I get
Yeah,
excited
there
about a new
you
adventure." So I apologize. Yeah, it's a really fun book. I'm really excited for it, and I'm running it, so I'm like devouring it as fast as I can, kind of like thoroughly devouring it. Like I'm trying to take my time so that I understand it, because I've read adventures where you just like you were saying, you don't skim them, but you kind of just go through them.
go. Hmm.
But yeah, yes, thank you, Pale Rider. That is the name of the other campaign setting.
Yeah. So I'm excited. Mostly, I read chapter number 1, which I felt like was one of the better chapter ones I've read in most of these adventures. Like, it really hooked me in. I like the simplicity of it. I like the smallness of it, but yet it has repercussions wider out from where you kind of start. And it feels like a really good starting point. Even Minds of Fandelver, kind of the town of Fandelver itself is great, but the rocky start you start your characters to get to Fandelver feels odd. Like, it's hard to say, why do 6 strangers decide to go on a wagon trip with nobody with them at all to tell them where to go or what to do,
Yeah,
and to kind of, you're almost like, just get them to Fandelver, don't worry about the whys, get them there, and then it starts to open up, and it really then starts to play like a really cool adventure. But this one, I love the way it grounds the whole story into the area that it's in. And so when I read that first chapter, Saltmarsh was one that I didn't think I was going to purchase, except probably for as a collection book to have on the shelf. I wasn't really thinking I was going to be playing any like seagoing adventures. I wasn't into the pirate theme at the moment, and that always changes. It could be a year from now, and that's all I want to do, that kind of thing. But I was thinking, no, I don't want it. But now I read this chapter 1 in there. I'm like, I'm interested to know what's going on in this town. There's just cool stuff happening that the players can be involved with or not involved with. I love the way they describe, if this happens, then this group decides to kind of do these things. And it gives you this idea as a dungeon master of where to take this story as it begins to unfold, not just here's what the current situation is, and then give you no idea of what to do when things start to change. And I felt like that was a departure from some of the other adventures I had read from Wizards of the Coast lately. So it was a really cool idea to harken back to, like you said, some of the old modules. It felt like an old module in that way, but done better and done more creatively. I'm going to do a quick review. It's got recorded. I just got to post it up at some point where I talk about that. It is spoiler free, and that's what I am trying to talk about in this vague term, spoiler free. But chapter 1 is really good about just setting, and it's Greyhawk, which I really like. I wish we had a few more books for Greyhawk, and I know, like we've always said, you can go back and get the ones from 3rd edition and anywhere else and just convert them, because it's not hard to bring things into 5e at all. But I like the idea of officially supported material that's the Greyhawk, the Gary Gygax campaign setting. And this is the gateway to it. I really feel like if you want to do a 5e Greyhawk campaign starting in 2018, 2019 now, you could use this book as your starting point and then start bringing in all that other cool stuff and maybe converting it on your own if you need to. You won't need too much more, because this gives you such a good grounding area to start in, and it's an interesting area to go and explore.
Yeah. No, it really is a mini campaign setting, that first chapter. And you very eloquently said it, but it has the whole town of Saltmarsh and the surrounding areas mapped out to the point where your players can freely explore this sandbox that is Saltmarsh. There is an adventure for them to go on. That's chapters 2, 3, 4, and 5, etc. As like you go on these different adventures that you're hired on to do. But if you want to be in town, they took some rules from Xanathar's to buy and sell magic items, to craft magic items. There's areas to go to if you just want to go to a pub and hear the latest rumors and be like, oh, and then you get a different job where you need to go into this forest to find elves, and it's really cool. Like for taking a bunch of random adventures, older adventures, and tying them into a book, it's interesting to see the difference between Tales of the Yawning Portal and this one. Where Tales of the Yawning Portal was very much like, oh, we'll just call it Tales of the Yawning Portal. It'll be kind of like, hey, there's no home base in Tales of the Yawning Portal. It literally is just a bunch of adventures, whereas Saltmarsh has a home base for all of the bunch of adventures that it gives you. So you can still run it like, I just want to run a level 5 adventure. I'll run this for like 3 or 4 sessions of D&D. Or you can run the whole thing. And they tried to do that with Tales of the Yawning Portal, but although the levels were there was a level 1 adventure that took you to level 3, and then there was a level 4 adventure that took you to level 5, etc. There was nothing tying it in. Now, the other cool thing about Ghosts of Saltmarsh is that it ties in with Tales of the Yawning Portal. Like, it says, hey, if you want, while your players are exploring Saltmarsh, there's also, like, they could go on this random adventure over here, or this is how you can tie Sunless Citadel into Tales of the Yawning Portal. Perhaps Sunless Citadel is located over here in this forest. Yeah, and so it's kind of funny because Ghosts of Saltmarsh, somebody in my Discord said that Tales of the Yawning Portal was a good book, but in comparison to Ghosts of Saltmarsh, we now see what Tales of the Yawning Portal could have been, and it's kind of like a sad book at this point. And I don't necessarily agree with that 100%, but I think you understand the sentiment where you're just kind of looking at it and you're like, oh, that's what it could have been. So, oh yeah, and Lucian is dog sitting this morning. He is number 1 dog dad, so excuse the barking if you hear barking.
To hear a little bit of it here. I also, oh boy, I'll let you keep going. Let me take care of that.
No, so it ties in with Tales of the Yawning Portal, which is really exciting. It basically gives you a setting for all of those adventures in Tales of the Yawning Portal, which is interesting because one of them is Tomb of Horrors, but they basically said like, and that's the 10th level one. 10 plus, and they said you can take Tales of the or Tomb of Horrors and place it in certain areas of the Saltmarsh region, which is really cool. There's all this like political stuff going on in Saltmarsh. Like it's a really rich, robust setting for just this thing. And I'm wondering if we get more of these in the future, because I would love I guess we kind of got this with Waterdeep Dragon Heist, where it was just like a book on Waterdeep and everything that goes on in Waterdeep. But like these mini campaign settings, like a Neverwinter book. And they did that for 4th edition, because I own the 4th edition Neverwinter book. But it has all the information of like, how do you run just a game within Neverwinter? And this is kind of the same thing. Like, how do you run just a game within Saltmarsh? But that's the cool thing, is that's just chapter 1. And then you have all these adventures that follow along with it. So
yeah, and I think it starts out really strong, chapter 1. Now, I did realize that when they talk about linking these things together, they are loosely linked together. They're still like, here's a sentence on how you could link them together. It's not like a detail of how you will link these things together. So as a dungeon master, you still have quite a bit of leeway that you're expected to kind of fill in the gaps of in between some of these other adventures, especially when you get past chapters 2, 3, and 4, which 2, 3, and 4, without spoiling everything, are probably the closest 3 to be linked fairly easily and kind of in line with each other.
They were linked together originally.
Yeah, it's the later ones where you're kind of linking them together, but it's going to take some work on your end. Just like if you were going to do Tales of the Yawning Portal, it took work on your end to make sure those were going to link together in some coherent way. Or even in Storm King's Thunder sometimes, like they put a lot of heavy lifting on the dungeon master in certain chapters to say, all right, well, they're at the end of chapter, say, 3, now you need to get them to chapter 4. That's up to you. The sentence is, here's a couple ideas, but it's only a couple of sentences long. So still be ready for that. But I thought of all the first chapter books I have read, Wizards of the Coast released for 5th edition, that has been my favorite first chapter. I thought that was the best, the most concise, and it sucked me right into the story that was going on in this town. And it made me feel really cool because there was a game that I was running that I was using a town called Salt Break, which was a port town that we started in, and I had a little bit of those kinds of things, but I had 2 factions in, and it was cool to realize how they, by having more, what they could do with it. And then it showed me a good template of how to set up my starter town when I do my adventure, to say, this is the stuff that GMs would want. This is their goals. This is the things that they want. Here's how they react if it works, and here's how they react if it doesn't work, right? Those things really help. And now I'm going to take that to heart as I try to finish writing up mine, which is the Salt Break city that I'm using, which could be very interchangeable. So it was really cool to see that, and I think it's going to be a good book. I'm excited to see a lot of people playing it. There's a lot of online games playing it right now, so it's going to be hard not to see spoilers at the moment. Like, I'm going to have to stay away from some of the shows, I think, because I think I want to play through it before I run it, or maybe I'll just run it. I don't know. We'll see. But we got the other. I mean, we've got Descent into Avernus coming. We've got, we've got this book, which sounds really cool. There's just so much good stuff going on right now. It's great. So it's a good book. I definitely recommend it.
And speaking of really good stuff, there was a secret announcement at the end of the Descent stream. So at the beginning of the stream on Friday, was it Friday they started? They announced a whole slew of stuff that we talked about on the Saturday Morning D&D show last week. And then Sunday during Game of Thrones, they decided to sneak in an extra little bit that they denied later on, but then Keith Baker said that it was true. There's a hardcover Eberron book coming out, which isn't really a surprise to anyone because we've been getting a lot of Artificer stuff that they're probably going to include in this hardcover book. But what is surprising is that it's not Wayfinder's Guide to Eberron. They're not going to take that book, throw in the Artificer, and then release it as a published book. They're working on a brand new book. And Keith Baker's been very vocal that he doesn't want to reprint old material. He wants to make new material for Eberron because that old lore, those old cities and those old NPCs still work. You just have to kind of change them a little bit for 5th edition. But his point was that it still is there. There's no reason to just reprint old material. He's like, why don't we just write new material for it? So it's a new Eberron book, which is exciting, just like Wayfinders was. And it's going to have all kinds of stuff. And I imagine they'll have the races wrapped into this new book as well. They'll probably reprint those from Wayfinder's Guide because it just makes sense to have like the Warforged and stuff along with the Artificer in a hardcover Eberron book. But that's exciting. And more, I like Eberron a whole bunch. Gives me more material to write videos on, so that's really exciting.
Yeah, and the way it came down is it was the Sunday night concert. At the very end of the concert, Nathan got on there and he said, well, I promised all of you on our show, Spoilers and Swag, that for all those people who've left and are now over watching Game of Thrones, and we'll give you a spoiler that none of them will know about. So he then says, we're doing an Eberron hardcover book. And then Monday on Twitter, when somebody starts asking him about it, he starts saying, "Oh no, there was no spoiler. We didn't say anything." But they weren't going to put up the VOD part of that, but they actually did, because he even said, while he's saying we won't even put up the VOD, so only the people that are here and only the people that are listening right now will know. All the others that left, they won't know. And it was just like, so I think he was just trying to play a joke in some way on that. So, but they didn't give us a lot of information yet. It's obvious that's going to be pretty big. Our show has reached out to Keith Baker, which is really cool. So there's a possibility, a potential that we might get to hear some from the writer himself. So we'll definitely keep everybody posted on that if that follows through, which I think will be really cool.
He said he'd be able to talk about it more this summer.
Yeah.
So we still have a little ways to wait, a couple months or so.
Which is great, because now we've got Secrets of Saltmarsh, and which is kind of a Greyhawk setting. We were going to have an Eberron book, which means that's an Eberron setting. We have plenty of Forgotten Realms settings, and we're going to go to Avernus, which is kind of another plane setting. So we're really starting to branch out from the different areas of Dungeons and Dragons, which I think is really cool, and bringing back other nostalgia for people who played in different worlds and different stuff. Us homebrew people that love to do their homebrew stuff, it's just more material for us to kind of pick and choose what we like and still have just good ideas on how we're going to do our things or use them as examples. And there's always usually pretty good rules in there. Going back to the Saltmarsh, I thought one of the things that was cool is all the ship stuff that's in there, like you mentioned. They did put a section in there about magic items. I thought it was really weak. What do you think about the magic items section of that? Did you go through that?
It was weak, but I didn't buy this book for the magic items, so I was okay with it. But they're not, and I should point out that although the magic items are weaker or just like not that much fun or things like that, they are story tied. So if you're buying this book to be like, oh, I want to use that magic item in my homebrew world, it doesn't really make sense, but it will be a cool magic item relating to the story and how they use it within the story, kind of a thing, because there's reasons. But no, it was not the best section. And it's very short.
The monster stat blocks, it was one page. The monster stat blocks, I was a little disappointed in. They reprinted a lot of stuff that we've got in other books, whether it was Monster Manual. There are several, maybe not quite half, but maybe near that number, maybe a third of them are reprints of monsters we already have. Another portion of them are monsters, but maybe they're a version of the monster. So you might get like a wizard of this or a warlock of this, or something like that. So it's still similar to something we've already had. And then there's like a third of them that are new that we haven't gotten in anything. I think I would have liked that ratio to be bigger of stuff that we haven't had yet, especially since we're going to kind of a new realm of underwater, and we're in the oceans and the seas, and there's a lot more stuff that we could do and bring about. I felt like there was room for a bigger monster section, or a monster section that didn't have so many reprints in it. But I still think it's good. I just think I felt like it could have been a little bit better, jumping back to that. So.
Now, on that, though, Wizards of the Coast has made it very clear that they want you to have the Player's Handbook, the Dungeon Master's Guide, and the Monster Manual in order to play D&D. So as long as I have those 3 books, I can go out and buy any other book. I don't need to buy Volo's Guide to Monsters in order to play Ghosts of Saltmarsh. And that's why they reprint those monsters that were in other things, because they want, and I'm sure Avernus is going to be the same thing, where that book is going to have a whole bunch of reprints from Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes, because they want you to be able to just have that book and the 3 core books in order to play D&D. So yeah, you can be disappointed with it, but at the same time, like, I kind of applaud them for that, because it, like, I also don't mind that I only need a monster manual and my Ghosts of Saltmarsh book at my table. If I needed like 4 books at my table because I'm running a monster fight with like all these different things, I would be very frustrated. So yeah. Cool. So that's the reasoning behind that, I believe. So yeah. In other news, Stephen Colbert plays D&D with Matt Mercer. I caught the first like 20 or 30 minutes of this. I haven't watched the whole thing. There's a bunch of memes going around that are like, find somebody who looks at you like Stephen Colbert looks at Matt Mercer and things like that. And it's really fun. So that's been going on, and you can catch that on YouTube's, I believe. It's out there somewhere. And they're doing it for the Red Nose charity, which is to end child hunger? Poverty. Okay. So that's in the news and going around. And it's a really good example of a one DM and one player, which you don't see very often. Yeah. Which kind of ties into the new Essentials that comes out, which is not meant to be played with one player, but you can play it with one DM and one player in case you don't have that slew of friends who are interested in D&D, but you have your buddy who's like, well, I'll play. So
yeah, what I liked about it was clear, or Stephen Colbert is an actor, Matt Mercer is an actor, so they're both actors, but it felt like that he was really into what was going on. It wasn't just he was putting a show on for his show, or it was a bit, or it was a gag or anything like that. It seemed genuine that he was really into it, and he just took it as, I'm being brought back to my teenage years, my early college years of playing a game, and I haven't played since then. And it just felt like he really took it in that. There was a very short kind of adventure. I was waiting to see reactions when you get Matt Mercer doing some voice stuff, and he didn't react the way I think a lot of us have reacted, in the way that when Matt does voices, you're like, oh my God, that's so cool. He was really about the game, and he was really about figuring things out and where the puzzles were and the traps were and the things that he should do and trying to understand what was going on. And I really liked that. He felt like a genuine player, or somebody who wanted to learn again, who had been a player. And there's so much stuff going around in your head of what it used to be like, but now you're trying to figure out what it is now.
Yeah.
And I thought it was interesting. I thought it was funny that they made him a bard. Apparently there was I don't know where this had come up, but they asked the community what class they should pre-create for him at some point, pre-roll for him. And I guess the community thought he should play a bard. I thought that was pretty funny, because that's such a weird one coming out of the gate for a Dungeons and Dragons reintroduction, to be, psychic damage, vicious mockery, inspirations. Those are kind of like outlier style abilities that you don't remember from like AD&D or Dungeons and Dragons. It was like, I want to hit something with a sword. Like, he fought with his long sword most of the time, which I thought was great, because that's just like that old school player coming out. Just like, I just swing my sword. I do what I need to do. So I thought that was cool. But it was fun. And I liked that it wasn't just a Matt Mercer, doing a game for another celebrity, which we have seen. We've seen the Vin Diesel one. We've seen him, do it with all these other people. There's all kinds of actors and stuff coming into the industry now that have loved Dungeons and Dragons, or are letting people know they love Dungeons and Dragons. But this was like this cool one-on-one show of a game. And I thought that made it stand out a little bit, to just remind us that you don't need a big party. You don't need a big set of players. If you can just get you and one other person on a same schedule, you can have a really cool and fun adventure with just 2 people. And that's kind of what the Essentials kit was talking about too, when we talked about we're going to see a one-on-one version of playing Dungeons and Dragons, which could work for, older people teaching younger people how to play with their schedules, maybe teaching your brothers, your siblings, your sisters, your daughters, whatever it might be, just one-on-one, having a game night at home. I think that's really cool. So I just thought it was nice to see that version of it. And it was fun. It looked fun. It was a cool little storyline that they were playing. And who knows if they'll ever play again? Who knows if we'll see more actors or more, that's a late night talk show host, taking some time out to do that. So that's pretty interesting. Will we see a Conan O'Brien Dungeons and Dragons game, which I probably could see that. He would do it with Dan Harmon or something.
No, it's funny that you mentioned that he was not joking around, because I think at the beginning of it I did feel like he was joking around, because he's just like, I don't know, what did I get myself into? And then he
Yeah.
just fell back into the magic of this. And there was one point where Matt Mercer said he said the word ichor. He's like, this ichor or something, and Stephen Colbert was like, I haven't heard the word ichor in the last 30 years. And it was like, welcome back to D&D. And he just like remembered how much fun it was. And I think I hope as I get older, I don't shy away from D&D. Like, I want to be that like 60-year-old guy playing Dungeons and Dragons because I love it so much. But it seems like a lot of people, they phase out of it as they get older. And well, maybe that's not happening right now. So like the new renaissance of role-playing games, people are playing at all ages, kind of a thing. So
Yeah, and I'm probably one of the people that are like you're saying, like I'm leery of the next celebrity they bring on and they're going to have them role play a game and how that celebrity handles it. Is it just a stunt? Is it just a publicity thing? Is it just bringing in? But that one felt, I think it's like you said, started out one way, but it genuinely went in another direction. Or he finally just let it be what it was, and it wasn't. He didn't have to be the jokester. He didn't have to do a comedy show about it. It was just enjoying. And I think what did it was, when Matt started describing the area that he was in and where he was walking through the forest, and the detail he used in the character and his companion with him and the traveling through, kind of brought him into, all right, this is a game we're going to play. And it wasn't just, a sort of interview or a sort of kind of, I don't want to say like a stunt or anything, but it, being that short, it feels almost like a publicity kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it was cool, and it was for charity, which is cool. I'm sure that charity is going to be doing really well, because if there's one thing that we all know about the critter community, is they are very giving. They are the type of people that when they start to back a charity, they back it full board. There's all kinds of, was it 826 LA gets a lot of support from them. There's all kinds of these other
Love
initiatives.
826.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah, no, they're really cool, because 826 is all over the United States. But if I'm thinking, actually, maybe I shouldn't say this until I actually know.
As we look it up. So I thought it was pretty cool while you're looking that up, and I think I felt like it was genuine. I felt like it would almost, like if we got like a Patton Oswalt, because we know he's big into Dungeons and Dragons. It would be like if we got some of these other people that we could definitely imagine had played Dungeons and Dragons before.
Yeah, 826 LA they have these storefronts. They're really clever. Sorry, I'm just going to go off on a tangent because I love these stores. They're really clever, where they have these funny storefronts in front of their like writing and reading education and homeschooling, not homeschooling, but tutoring and stuff. And in LA, it's the time travel mart. And you can go in and they sell these funny little like time travel products. In Seattle, where I used to live right across the street from the Greenwood Space and space travel supply store. And so everything was like space and going to different planets and things like that. And then I went to Chicago, and they have the one that was 826 Chicago, which was the not a secret agent spy store. And you go in and it's like all of this spy stuff and things like that. And so they have these funny fronts that kids can play around with, all these toys. And then there's like the tutoring in the back, and they're all really great nonprofits. And so it's been cool. Anyway, sorry, geeking out about that.
No,
I just love, I love those stores. So.
So, and then, I mean, even just leading on to that, we all got a big treat this week. I think we saw a little bit of it on Twitter, as some people were posting an image, and everybody kind of freaked out a little bit in a good way. But we got to finally see the cool Brazilian commercial for the Renault car, which used the Dungeons and Dragons original cartoon characters in live costumes as live actors. And it was actually done really well. Like, I didn't understand any of the language that was going on, but I was like hooked. I was like, where is this on my Saturday morning? We should be playing this at the front of our show all the time, just because it was so good. So well done.
So it's the old Dungeons and Dragons cartoon, and they use those characters in a live action sense to have this car commercial. That cartoon, interestingly enough, they never get home in the cartoon.
No.
And so a lot of people were saying that this commercial was like the capstone on top of the whole series, because they finally make it home in the commercial as they like jump in a car and drive through a portal or something.
Yeah,
But
and not only is it just the kids, but we get the little unicorn that followed everybody around. They defeat Tiamat in it, so it's like you get to see the light up of the bow, which is iconic. You get to see the shield from the paladin, which is iconic. You see the invisible cloak happen. I mean, you get all the cool stuff that you need. And you even have Venjors, the one who's running around trying to kill him with the one horn off the side of the helm. Just iconic villain, bad guy from the 80s cartoons. It was just really cool to see. And I'm so glad. I don't know. I mean, I assume they must have had to have contacted Wizards of the Coast to use it. Or maybe that cartoon is owned by another company, the rights to the cartoon. So maybe they can use it, as part of a media thing. But man, wouldn't it be cool if Netflix took that and ran with it and gave us, a couple of season show based off of that? I'm like, get those actors too. I'll learn Spanish just to figure out what's going on, because it was super cool and very well done, I thought. So if you haven't seen it, check it out on YouTube. Maybe we'll post it in the chat at some point so people can go and take a look.
I'll put it in the description of the video when this goes as a VOD. But you should just check it out. It's fun. It's like a couple minutes long, but it's really cool. And then go ahead and talk about our next Kickstarter that's coming up. Like, I didn't even know that this was happening, and it sounds really cool.
One more thing that caught my eye. I just kickstarted it myself this morning, it's called Grimmer Space. It is a new campaign setting for the Starfinder campaign, which is the Paizo's game, which is their kind of futuristic sci-fi version of Pathfinder. And one of the main writers is, I always say his name wrong, Sean Austin, right? It's not Shane, right? It's Sean.
Sean Austin, yeah.
Sean Austin, who I loved, who got to come back in Stranger Things recently and come back into our lives, but also, most famous for being, Samwise, or even a lot of other stuff, a lot of kids' 80s shows, a lot of other things that he was in when he was younger. I mean, Goonies, one of my favorite, kid growing up movies to watch as a kid. I loved it. And so he's a writer of this, which blew my mind because, one, he's writing that. And I think I knew he was a role player. I forget where I had heard it from. Like, it was in some interview where they went through his house and looked at his toy collection or something, like all his movie props and stuff that he has at his own home. And I think that's somehow I knew he was a role player. There was something there that did that, but I'd totally forgotten about it. So he's not only a role player, but he's writing a role-playing game, and they're kickstarting it right now. It's called Grimmer Space. The one thing I liked about their little catchphrase was, it's a science-only galaxy that has secretly been invaded by ancient wizards from the other side of the universe. So it's like taking a sci-fi setting and then throwing in big magic all of a sudden out of nowhere. And how are those two things going to battle or work together or oppose each other, or what's going to happen? So it looks really good. It looks like it's a professionally done Kickstarter. They've got a big star backing it. I think it's awesome that he's a writer for it. And so I was really excited. I thought I would tell everybody about it and kind of added it to our show notes. So
for sure. I didn't know anything about it, but I mean, he's obviously a big celebrity. So for him to be like, let's do a Kickstarter for Starfinder is kind of like put Starfinder on the map even more. So yeah. And
it's a game that, did you get to play it?
No, I played Pathfinder 2 as like a test at Gen Con, but I have never played Starfinder. I flipped through the book.
I thought you played on Cody's channel for like just a couple of sessions, but maybe it wasn't that. Okay, so I kept thinking, but I knew we've talked about Starfinder in the past, and me and you've said that it's one of those RPGs that we like the presentation to, and it's one that we would like to play at some point, though we're always super busy playing Dungeons and Dragons and all this other stuff, kids on bikes and all these other things. It's one of the games that's definitely on my list of I want to play. Like, I want to try it out. I want to either run it or be playing it. And I think this would be another cool thing. And for those of you that are fans of Paizo and Pathfinder and Starfinder and those, they're having their big convention right now in Seattle over this weekend. And so if you're in that area, you could be over there, and they're doing they do a huge Pathfinder society, just like Adventure League. The community is nice and robust for Pathfinder and Starfinder. It's different than the Dungeons and Dragons community, I think. I think there's some overlap, but I think they've garnered a pretty big community on their own that they still are, continuing to support, continuing to put out a lot of books. Paizo puts out a ton of books for content if you want stuff for your different games, lots of different campaign settings, lots of other writers writing for it. So it's a whole nother part of our community, no, our hobby. That's what I wanted. Our hobby, that if you might be interested in, maybe Dungeons and Dragons is cool, but it's not quite your thing, then there's definitely some of these other ones to check out. So I thought I'd throw that on our show notes.
Yeah, no, for sure. Starfinder's fun. Somebody in chat was just like, I think you're thinking about Numenera, because that's what I played on Cody's channel on Saber Dice was Numenera.
That's what it was. And I love Numenera.
Love Numenera.
I love Monty Cook games. I hope they keep getting bigger. I hope they have like a Monty Cook live event 2019 that we get invited to at some point. I love Numenera. I love the Strange. I love the Cipher system. They're all
super fun. All right. Yeah, so lots of stuff's going on. That was a big news heavy morning. Yeah. But Lucian, did you play any games this last week?
I did. I got to play a couple of games. And then I got to end or transition a campaign. But let's start with what we played. So I've been playing Tomb of Annihilation on Wednesday nights. We got together, and the one thing I liked about this was the first time, and I'm trying to do a non-spoiler, so if any of you others are going back and playing Tomb of Annihilation, which isn't that cool? Like, I'm going back and I'm playing these old modules, campaign settings that are still back there. So it's not just like we're all playing Saltmarsh because Saltmarsh just came out, or everybody's playing the one thing. There's still groups of people, even playing online, that are going back to the old material and saying, let's play through it, which is really fun. So we got to fight a legendary creature in the big city that we're kind of exploring through. And it was a first time where we had fought a pretty big battle and used up a lot of resources before. We decided to carry on with about half of our resources available to us. And then we get hit by this big legendary creature. So we're about half our power level almost. Mm-hmm. And we throw off, we're like, that's it. We've got to go all in if we're going to beat this thing, because this thing is like full on deadly. We throw those first two game changer spells at it, and it uses those legendary resistances just to blow it off. And you're just going like, oh my God, that was my last. I'm a wizard. I'm throwing my last powerful thing I've got, and he just blew it off without a roll. Or he misses the roll. You get excited and then uses a legendary action just to blow it off. And I'm just like, no. And I was thinking from a player standpoint, because normally as a dungeon master, you do those things to make sure your combats last, and they feel epic when you're using these legendary creatures with legendary actions. But this one felt, as a player, like I felt like, oh no, this was my one shot to do something, and you just canceled it. I'm down to cantrips at this point against this really powerful creature. This is not going well. But it all turned out where our party was able to pull itself out, so it was really good. My question for you was, how many times have you used creatures where they had legendary actions, and how did you feel about the number that they had and how you use them and how your players reacted?
I've started giving legendary actions to monsters that don't have them, because my players are able to just like tie down monsters with stuns and things like that, especially the monk with like stunning strike. What's interesting though is the more I use those, the more my party's just like, oh, okay, so we've got to burn through 3. So they'll do like weaker spells or weaker this to try and burn through those, and then go for the stunning strikes and like lock them down. So I've even upped it to like, some of them have 4, some of them I'll just give them like 1 or 2 to kind of to mix and match. I think it's a great way, like if your party is mowing over somebody, like it's a great way of just being like, no, just give them like two legendary resistances, sorry, is what I'm thinking of. Not necessarily legendary reactions, but like legendary resistances, because those, like your party will just stun lock them forever, and it's really frustrating as a DM.
Yeah, because that's what you didn't want. That's what was going to happen. We our bard tried to cast hypnotic gaze, which would have gave us some time to maneuver and get some good shots on the thing, but he blew that one off. And I did what you just said. Like, I knew he had those resistances, and I was trying to wait long enough that he used them all to throw my slow spell out. But he just kept it, and he kept it, and he kept it. And by the end, we're like 3 rounds in. I'm like, I can't hold it any longer. This is going bad. It's all going downhill. I cast my slow spell, and he blows it off. I'm like, no. But that's the thing. I wanted to try to lock down that creature. I wanted to try to, and as a dungeon master, we want our creatures to feel epic. We want our parties to feel in danger. So we're kind of seeing it from both directions. So it was pretty funny to be able to see that from both directions. And yeah, I do like legendary actions. I like how you can use them to make the fight feel epic when it needs to be epic, and you don't have to use it if you don't need them, but they're there when all of a sudden they're trying to use fear after fear after fear after fear, or they're trying to use some type of mind control lockdown or polymorph. I'm going to polymorph it into a chicken. Oh, it didn't work. Okay, I'm going to try to polymorph it the next turn, you know, if you're playing a higher level kind of campaign.
And you could flavor it just by saying, like, he shrugs it off, or your spell is not effective and you don't know why. And so maybe they don't understand that it's a legendary. Like, a smart player, I guess, will probably be like, oh, he's got legendary resistances. But a new player might just be like, oh my gosh, polymorph just doesn't work on this monster, you know? And so there's that. So, but yeah, I don't know. There's probably not a wrong way to do this. There's many different ways to take care of, like, how do you make your monsters a little more tough? But yeah, running a campaign with 10, 11th level players, especially the monk, like, I don't know, somebody once told me that the monk is like underpowered, but we have a monk and he's like running on the walls and like doing flips off the ceiling and stunning striking creatures. And all he has to do is spend key, and he gets 4 hits because he spends flurry of blows, so he has 4 chances per round to stun him. And I know he will run out of key, but he's got 11 key points. He can do this 11 times in a match, like, if they're fully rested. And he usually saves those 4 bosses, because what else is he spending his key on, you know? It's definitely interesting. So,
and I did see in chat the Aliens RPG. Yes, I did pre-order today, because it is 5/25. Pre-orders open this morning. You could go and pre-order, and I pre-ordered the special edition, and hopefully I get that sometime soon. So
that's awesome.
Spent $100 on that one. I love Aliens so much.
We'll
My wife, when she sees a credit card bill for this month, is going to be mad because I bought too many games and too many Kickstarters. But we'll save that for later. She doesn't watch the show, so she probably will never know.
Yeah, there you go.
So other than that, on Thursday, I played Horde of the Dragon Queen. This is an older adventure, which is the reason I like to go through it. It's being run by a newer DM, so I like the experience of working with a new DM or just learning. I like everything I do when I'm playing a game right now, I use the lens of I am a dungeon master to look at it through it, plus what my player does. Like, I'm thinking about my character, and I'm role playing the character, and I'm having fun, but I'm also looking at everything through the dungeon master lens of, okay, if this was me and I'm running this part of the session, what would I do here? What would be the things that I would like to add, or the things that I would like to do or point out, or that kind of stuff? What's my dialogue? Those kinds of things. And it just gives me a chance to help try to improve my skill while watching somebody else kind of present the material as the dungeon master. So I think that's cool. The one thing that I thought was really cool, and it must have tied in, and I don't even think this was even planned or anything, we ironically end up visiting Baldur's Gate just as we hear the big announcement that the next big storyline is going to happen in Baldur's Gate, which is pretty cool. But we're only there for a brief moment as we kind of continue on in the adventure, which sounds like it's going to take us along the Sword Coast a lot more than I thought. I didn't realize Horde of the Dragon Queen, we're going to do so much traveling. I kind of felt like it was more of but maybe I was thinking of Princes of the Apocalypse, which is maybe more of a smaller area where all this stuff is happening. Maybe Horde of the Dragon Queen, I don't think I've read as much on it, so maybe
you travel quite a bit. Yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah.
So my Artificer that I'm playing in that is level 4. I decided to go with the ability upgrade because I had rolled really bad stats for my Artificer. I have a couple of 8s and 9s in there, and I wanted to make sure that my main stat, I didn't even have an 18 anywhere in there. So I think for most of my upgrades at that 4th level, and then when you get ability increases, I'm going to use it on this character. Many times I'm looking at feats or things that I can do to bring in a new flavor to the character or make them better at something, because I really like feats, and most dungeon masters allow you to use them in their games. But on this character, I felt like because I rolled bad enough, I just need to get my ability scores, because really ability scores are powerful in 5e. I mean, they are not something just to ignore. They really do drive the math of 5e these days. So having good stats, having a character that has 2 or 3 18s is a big difference to somebody who has like straight 10s or something in the game. So it's definitely makes you feel like that superhero when you have those high stats. So that's kind of what I went with that. Not doing any spoilers for it, but it's been pretty fun. And then we get to Seeking Revenor, which is my campaign, the West Marches style campaign. And last night, the protective bubble over the town of Port Bastion, which has kept it hidden from all of the factions in this new world that they're exploring, has dissolved and popped. And a red dragon has basically just routed the town with a few passes before it is wounded and injured and has to fly away by a powerful wizard from within the town.
Mm-hmm.
And it was my transition because I've decided that my West Marches experiment is done at this point. I feel like I understand how I was making my rules, the way I did them, the testing I wanted to do with it, how running a West Marches was, how to run multiple groups, how that all works. I didn't think I did the best job of it, but I think I did a pretty good job of it, and I have a better understanding of what a West Marches game is now. And now I want to get it back to being a regular campaign where I have a single party that is still going to adventure in that world, which has all been set up by all these parties that have went out and done stuff, which is really cool because there's so many different things going on that this party can decide what thing they're going to tackle and where they're going to go. And it feels like they're jumping into a living world. I think most of them are going to keep the characters that they have.
Mm-hmm.
Many of them are going to write their deaths as the attack happens on the town. And so they can, describe how heroically they were doing something, but for those that aren't going to continue in the campaign, what their demise is and how we go forward from there. And we'll get a lot more interaction with NPCs now. We'll get a lot more interaction with kind of what's going on and not so combat heavy, I don't think, as much, versus that's kind of how a West Marches has to be. It has to be kind of combat heavy when you're running lots of different groups at different times out there. So I felt like it was really cool. I'm excited that I got to do it and got to experiment with it.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm ready to really take this story in my homebrew world of Revenor and really open up with some of the stuff that's out there. So I'm excited to get them going and headed in the right direction, because I think there's a lot of good story there yet to be told. So
Sweet.
that has been my week. And other than that, I've been cleaning my pool. And I'm a first-year pool owner, and owning a pool is a lot of work, people. Make sure if you're going to do that, you realize what you're getting into. And I'm hoping soon I'll be able to. I want to host a D&D party in the pool sometime this summer, so I think that'd be pretty fun and cool. But it's a lot of work. But
all those people that cement in their pools now, you totally understand why they do that.
Yeah.
So
I'm like, why would you want to do that? Yeah. So what did Jordan do in role playing? He must have played some games. Something must have happened.
Well, I played Scarab of Death, which is a high-level murder mystery. So I've got 10th level players now. And we needed something to fill the time before Saltmarsh came out. And so I was like, I've ran this before. I want to run it again. It's called Scarab of Death. It's a high-level murder mystery. It's really fun. Like, I super love this module, and I'll put it in chat if you guys are interested in it. But I super love this module. It's really fun. It's takes place in Waterdeep, and so basically my players were teleported from the Hot Springs Island to Waterdeep through a teleportation ring they jumped through, and they kind of got like sidetracked and landed there accidentally. They solved basically a rogue golem within Blackstaff Tower was going crazy, and they helped destroy that golem or take care of that golem. And then after that, they went on an adventure, and they went on a shopping spree in a district of Marketplace District, and there was a murder. And let me back up. The reason I love this adventure is because you are allowed to use high-level spells. You are allowed to use all kinds of level 10 abilities that you might have. Like, it takes into factor that your cleric might have commune, where he can just talk straight with his god and get an answer. It takes into account that you have spells like Zone of Truth, so that when you're interrogating people to try to find out who murdered who, that those people will be under that influence of that spell and be forced to tell the truth. Which makes it really fun, because all of those things are just lead into more clues that then the players still have to physically solve a mystery. It's not the character solving a mystery through dice rolls. It's the players really have to think about what's going on and have to figure it out. And they went on a couple of different tangents thinking like, oh, well, it has to be devils. Devils are causing all of these problems. Or it has to be this. This has to be causing all these problems. So they had their clues, and they went through and interviewed a bunch of people, and they weren't 100% correct, but they were on the right track. And so they solved the murder. I don't want to give away the whole thing, so I won't. But they ended up solving the murder, and we had a really good time. The final boss is kind of this high level wizard, I guess, who has access to like I think like 7th and 8th level spells. And one of my players, his jaw hit the floor. He's like, "That's a 6th level spell." I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm not messing around. Like I've got like this." And of course, it's 4 of them versus 1 of me. So they ended up like being able to take care of it, no problem. But that's a little spooky when he starts casting spells like Maze and Disintegrate and really like locking down certain players in this instance. It was fun. And I feel bad. I was going to talk to you about the spell Animate Objects. Are you familiar with this spell?
It sounds familiar, but I don't know if I know the details off the top of my head.
So you can create 10 tiny to small items and animate them. So something like daggers, or like one of the jokes on the internet is carry around 10 forks with you, and you can animate 10 forks to attack for 1d4 plus 4 damage, I think, or something crazy like that. Or you can animate 5 like medium objects, or you can animate like 3 larger objects or 1 huge object. It lets you scale up to animating like giant statues and stuff like that.
Ooh, I like it.
So it's a really cool spell, but it's kind of overpowered if you do the 10 small objects, because you basically get 10 attacks as opposed to getting like 1 attack from like the giant huge objects. And although this huge object does more damage, we all know that being able, like action economy wise, being able to hit more often is better than that. So my player animated 8 daggers that he was carrying around with him. And these things can move like 20 feet, I think. And here's where it's frustrating, because do I allow my player to utilize his cool spell and make this attack, make this whole encounter just done like that? Or do I negate it? And so I ended up having my my wizard that was attacking them. He teleported out of the room into another room. So it was going to take like maybe 2 or 3 turns for those daggers to like catch up to him. And I could tell that my player was really like, "Oh, like I don't even get to attack with it." And I'm like, I'm really sorry, but at the same time, like you were going to annihilate my wizard in like 1 hit.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's an interesting spell. There's a lot of debate about it online, and I don't necessarily know, but I guess a good Dispel Magic would be appropriate, or it is concentration. So attacking the guy that did this to like lose concentration on it is also a viable tactic. But so maybe it's not, maybe that's why it's not as powerful as I think it is.
Yeah.
But
or
boy,
counterspell at that point, you already have that kind of stuff to fight it.
Exactly. Dispel magic. But like, yeah, summoning 10 forks and doing 10 attacks per round is pretty crazy. So, yeah, so we finished Scarab of Death. I really love that. And that's kind of...
I have a question for you then.
I would love to answer a question. So
that's an adventure that is designed to test the players, not the characters.
Correct.
If it's a mystery, it's about if they can solve it.
Yes.
What advantages do I get if I'm a 18 intelligence wizard who, in reality, if we're thinking about an 18 intelligence, you're talking about like Sherlock Holmes level of intelligence for the character. Now, me as the dumb player, I don't have that kind of, my intelligence is a 10 at best. Maybe it could be an 8 or 9 argued. And now I'm trying to play a super smart character, or my character should be super smart. Did anybody bring that up in the session for you? Did anybody try to go that route and say, well, my character should know this kind of thing?
Nobody brought that up because I don't arguably have any like high intelligence wizards in my group. Like we have a cleric and we have a bunch of other stuff, but the game does have mechanics for that. Like if you roll a really good investigation check, then you might notice X, Y, and Z about this character. If you roll a really good insight check, you might notice that this person is telling the truth, but there's something off about them, you know? And so you kind of learn that there's something going on between certain characters, or there's something like, I don't know, without giving it all away, I can't really say more, but yeah, like you can utilize that you're super smart, but ultimately it is down to the player, and the player just has to like put the clues together, which is what I like about it. Cause I don't like it when I'm presented with a puzzle and I'm like, well, I've got a 20 intelligence. Can we just say that I figured out the puzzle? I'm like, that's just not fun for me. Like there is something to be said, like challenge the players and have them figure out the puzzle. So
what if they had gotten stuck?
Well, there are NPCs that there's actually like a Sherlock Holmes NPC that is sent from the Waterdeep like guards to basically be an investigator, and he will like nudge them along in certain areas.
Okay.
I've never had to utilize him before, but if they do
Mhm.
get completely stuck, he's there to be like, I was sent by Scotland Yard to help you out, and da da da. And so he runs around and kind of says like, well, that doesn't make sense. What do you think? And there's a lot of like just kind of pointing out the obvious, like, well, this doesn't make sense. Like, what do you think? And allowing the players to be like, oh, you're right, that doesn't make sense. Let's look at this in a new light is kind of the idea.
I only mention it because I've been in a campaign where it ended because we were in a room. Somebody triggered the trap. You get teleported to in front of like a Sphinx kind of creature who says a riddle. And the only way to get back is to solve the riddle. So they give us the riddle. Well, nobody in our party could solve the riddle. We spent the entire session trying to figure out the riddle. We couldn't do it. And it was just like, we give up. We don't know what to do. So the campaign ended with our characters who starved to death in this room, couldn't solve the riddle, and never made it past that. And I just remember that was a very weird thing for me to think back on, was this, what do you do when there's no other option? And I love the idea that there's an NPC that helps nudge along when things just aren't going right, because it's possible that players can get off on a tangent and just not. And when we heard the answer, it was one of those things where you were like, oh yeah, that makes total sense. But we could not come to that conclusion on our own. It seemed simple to the DM, but it was not simple to us as 6 players couldn't solve the riddle.
And I think that's one of those instances where you always need to have, like, if you're going to make a dice, like it kind of goes with that same thought process of, if you're going to have the players roll a die, then there has to be something that happens when they fail. And so this is the same thing. If they're not able to answer this riddle, maybe something attacks them, but it doesn't like lock them in a room and they can never get out forever. Like if you only have a contingency for them winning, then that's incorrect, because there is a chance that even with the simplest of riddles, they won't get it. You know, there's always a chance if you be like, well, they'll figure out a way out of this room if they can roll a 15 investigation check. Well, there's always a chance. What if they don't roll a 15 investigation check? And you as the DM are just like, well, I don't know. Like, I was kind of just, I mean, if everybody rolls, somebody's going to get it right. And that's kind of the wrong mindset I think that's the wrong mindset. So
Yeah.
like, I think you need to have, what happens if they don't hit that mark? What happens if they don't answer that riddle? There has to be something in the game that happens other than just like, well, you're stuck forever, permanently. That's awful. Goodbye. So
Tomb of Annihilation.
Tomb of Annihilation right there, buddy. Anyway, cool. And then the other thing, I've just been reading Saltmarsh. My players are getting their backstories together, and we're trying to weave how they know each other, or how they're, which is really funny, because a lot of them are just like, well, I'm a pirate, or I'm this, or I don't know why I'm coming to Saltmarsh, or I've lived in Saltmarsh, or I'm doing this. And so they're all coming from weird different backgrounds. And I don't want to, but I think what I'm going to have to do is say, you were summoned by the town council and they have an adventure for you. Because I literally don't know how else to get all of these characters together.
Rein them in. Yeah, because we've gotten to the point now where
there's so many different backgrounds.
There's so many cool backgrounds. There's so many cool classes, but they don't all necessarily mesh together when you have the Lizardman cleric, and you have the ASMR paladin, and you have the, just like, it's just going crazy at this point. That's got to be tough.
Yeah. So that's what I'm dealing with for the weekend, I guess, is I'm going to try and come up with a way for them to be all together. And I might just have to use that old trope of like, hey, the king summoned you for an adventure kind of a thing. He's looking for adventurers. You guys signed up. Now you're in a party, work together, go. But yeah, so feel like I'm ending on a bad note, or not a bad note, but just
going
like
back to the other conversation. MJS October mentioned, what about taking 20? Has anybody used?
I don't use that in 5th edition. I don't use it in 5th edition, but
used it, and I've never had a player try to use it in any game that I ran of 5th edition.
I have had, like, a barbarian was trying to open a door, and he rolled a strength check and he failed. And I have used, if you want, I'll let you automatically succeed, but you take a level of exhaustion. So like you can break open that door, but you take a level of exhaustion because it was just too frustrating. And I've used that, and I guess you could use that also with, it doesn't make so much sense with picking a lock as a thief, but you could use the same thing. Like I'll give you an automatic success, but there has to be some kind of hindrance to that. Like you automatically get through this, but you lose your thieves tools. So you have to find new thieves tools or buy new thieves tools, or you get through this and you get a level of exhaustion. I've used that in the past because it is kind of weird when it's like, I try to break down the door, you fail. Well, can I try again? Like that mentality. And that's where I think the taking 20 rules come from, because you're like, well, I'll just say that for the next 10 minutes, I tried enough to get through this. And I've never really used that. I feel like there needs to be a consequence.
Yeah, and I've always made it so, like you had mentioned in before, even the breaking down the door thing is because it's possible for the barbarian who's a 20 strength barbarian just to roll a 1 twice.
Yeah.
And so you have to narratively figure out a reason why that is. It's not that the door's any, the gnome with a 12 strength could roll a 20 and break the door down.
Yeah.
Once it gets past its DC, but all of a sudden, because of a bad roll, you didn't get through it. So I've tried to, like you said, make it so that I'm not just thinking of success, but what happens when failure. But even Kyle from chat mentioned, like I do the taking 20 rule when there's no downside to failure. To me, I remove those rolls. If there's no downside to failure, I just let them do it. I just let them, you're the barbarian, just break it down. You don't need a roll. If there's no downside, it doesn't make, if you're going to try to say, I'm going to break it down without making noise, or I'm going to try to break it down, but I want to save it so we can use it for something else, there might be a role for that to see if that accomplishes. But I've gotten rid of I'm just going to break down a door roll pretty much completely. Just almost using like passive skills for them, because there's no reason why somebody with a 20 strength shouldn't be able to break down a wooden door. Mm-hmm. If it's just a wooden door. I mean, there's other reasons, obviously. The
consequences for that could be, like you said, they're noisy and they attract monsters, and monsters are like, why is this door broken down, or something like that. So, or puts the rest of the dungeon on alert because they know that there's, certain sections that are,
or even like climbing things. Like I don't ever make it so that you try to climb halfway up the cliff, then you fail, you fall, climb halfway up the cliff, you fail, you fall. Mm-hmm. Like I don't want to put on the cliff 7 different rolls, because you're going to fail at some point during 7 different rolls. To me, it's just like you make one roll and that's all about how fast you get up the cliff, or if you suffered a little bit of damage doing it, but then moving on. Like it's not going to be, you're not getting up the cliff. You were always going to get up the cliff. It's just what happened to you while you did it is your roll helps me narrate. So I think that's just one DM thing that you can think of. Don't think of things that block them. Think of things that are a consequence, but they still accomplish.
And how does it change the story too? Like did you roll so if the DC for that door was 14 and they rolled a 14, you do it, but it took you quite a bit and you made a lot of noise and you do this. Or if it's like, no, the DC was 14 and I rolled a 23, well, you kick through the door and it just breaks off its hinges immediately. Like you can use and Kids on Bikes is really good about that. Like the discrepancy between numbers, you succeed more. So if the DC was 10 and you rolled a 20, you super succeed. But if the DC was 10 and you rolled 11, you just succeeded. How did you just succeed? So anyway,
it as a narrative. Use it as a narrative.
Yeah. Anyway, that's our show, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for coming out for episode 69 of the Saturday Morning D&D show. We have more shows planned in the future, so what should we do for 100? I didn't even think about that. That's cool. We should have like a something big mailbag episode or something, a giveaway, something cool for 100. That sounds awesome. Which is coming up. Thank you guys so much for coming out. We had a record number of people in both chats, I feel like. So it was really great to see you guys on Twitter and on YouTube. Give us a thumbs up, share this with your friends, all that other stuff. And with that, any final thoughts, sir, before we take off?
Nope. It was great to see everybody out here. Keep the discussion going in the comment area of the videos. Definitely check us out on Twitter and send us messages on Twitter about what you thought about the show, other things we could talk about, or just, again, keep the conversation going. And make sure you go out and rate that podcast, because we're trying to really get that up in the ranks so that more people see that.
Give
and
us
then
some...
hopefully we'll get to go to Dungeons and Dragons Live 2019 and bring you guys all the fresh news live from those types of events. So.
Yeah, always, if you could give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, on iTunes Podcasts, because that helps circulate the podcast some more. Thanks again, guys, for just being awesome. I love our community. We have a Discord if you're interested. I don't have the Discord link, but it is in the show notes. I don't have it handy right now, but we have a Discord if you guys want to keep the conversation going. And with that, we will see you next week with another episode of the Saturday Morning D&D Show. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.